She secretly siphoned $200, $0 from our joint account to fund her affair with my brother, then falsely accused me of domestic abuse to hide the theft, and now she's claiming half my inheritance in court. I never thought I'd be the guy sitting here, writing about how everything I believed in turned out to be a lie. But here I am, trying to make sense of a nightmare I didn't see coming. It all started with what seemed like small signs, little things that I brushed off at first. My wife Jessica had always been a bit bitchy, but she was also charming when she wanted to be. We'd been married for 8 years, and honestly I thought we had a pretty solid life. She was gorgeous, ambitious, and we had a nice house, good jobs, and a few investments. Things seemed perfect, or so I thought. Then out of nowhere she started acting different. She'd be more secretive with her phone, hiding her screen when I walked into the room. She'd get defensive over tiny things, snapping at me for no apparent reason. I noticed she was pulling away emotionally, but I told myself it was just stress. Maybe work was hectic or she was tired. I didn't want to admit I was missing something bigger. The first real sign that something was seriously wrong came when I checked our bank account. Jessica had always been good with money, but suddenly there were strange transactions, small amounts here and there, and then a huge one. I saw a transfer of $200, $0 from our joint account to an account I didn't recognize. My heart stopped. I immediately called the bank, but the money was gone and the account was already closed. I felt this cold shock, like I'd been punched in the gut. Who the hell siphoned that much money? And why? I started digging into her social media, but she deleted most of her messages and blocked me from her accounts. I couldn't find much, but I remembered her mentioning a new friend at work, someone she'd been talking to more and more. I thought maybe she had a side hustle or some kind of secret project. But when I found her phone, I saw a message thread that made my stomach turn. It was from her, and it said something about meeting up tonight, but the location was suspicious. I looked closer and saw she'd been meeting with my brother Mike behind my back. My mind was racing. My wife, the woman I loved, was cheating on me with my brother. The betrayal hit me like a freight train. I confronted her that night. I demanded to know what was going on, and she just smirked, acting like I was overreacting. She lied, of course, said I was paranoid, that I was imagining things. She told me I was crazy to think she'd cheat with Mike. But I had the proof. The messages, the money transfer, her secret meetings. I felt sick and furious all at once. How could she do this? How could she betray me like this, then have the nerve to lie about it? The worst part was the way she twisted everything around. She started accusing me of abuse, saying I'd hit her, yell at her, anything to make me look bad. She claimed I was controlling and paranoid. But I knew the truth. I knew she was the one sneaking around, stealing from us and lying through her teeth. And her lies weren't just about the affair, they were about everything. She claimed I was abusive, but I never raised my voice at her. I was stunned. How could she think she could get away with all of this? How could she turn it all around and make me look like the villain? That night, I felt a mix of heartbreak and rage. My trust was shattered. I wondered how I'd been so blind. I'd worked hard to build our life, and now I was left with nothing but a trail of lies and betrayal. I knew I couldn't just walk away and pretend it was all a bad dream. I had to figure out what to do next, how to handle the mess she made. But deep down, I knew this was just the beginning. Things were about to get a lot worse before they got better. After that night, everything changed. The house felt colder, emptier. I couldn't sleep, couldn't eat. All I kept thinking about was how Jessica had stolen so much from us, 200, money that was supposed to go toward our future, our retirement, maybe even a vacation. Instead, she siphoned it off to fund her affair with my brother Mike. The thought made my stomach churn. I felt betrayed not just by her, but by someone I thought was family. I started digging into her phone more, trying to piece together how long she'd been cheating, how much she'd taken, and what she'd lied about. What I found was worse than I expected. Jessica had been in contact with Mike for months, maybe longer. Secret texts, late-night calls, plans made in whispers. It was like she'd been living a double life. And all the while she was pretending to be the perfect wife. Bitchy, yes, but also seemingly loyal, or so I thought. The money, though, that was the real punch. I pulled our bank statements, looked at the transfers, and tracked every penny she'd taken. It was clear she'd been planning this for a while. I found receipts for expensive jewelry, designer clothes, fancy dinners, all paid for with our joint account. She'd been living beyond her means, all funded by the money she stole, and she lied to me about her spending. She told me she was saving for a house renovation, but instead, she was funneling cash into her secret life. I decided I had to confront her again. I sat her down in the living room, my heart pounding. I told her. I knew everything: the affair, the money, the lies. Her reaction was a textbook example of her bitchy attitude. She sneered, rolled her eyes, and said I was overreacting. She claimed she was just having fun, that I was paranoid and controlling. She even accused me of spying on her, saying I was the one cheating or hiding something. The audacity. I was furious, but I kept my composure. I told her she had to leave, that I wanted her gone, and that I was done. She tried to turn it around as usual. Started crying, saying I was ruining her life, that she loved me, and that I was the one who was abusive. She said she was just trying to find herself, and that the affair was just a mistake. But I didn't buy it. I saw through her lies. I knew she'd been lying about everything, including her feelings. She was manipulative, and I realized she had been controlling the narrative from the start. That night, I felt a mixture of relief and despair. Relief because I finally saw her for who she really was, and despair because I realized my whole life had been a sham. I thought about the money she took, the betrayal, the way she lied relentlessly. It was like discovering that the person you loved most in the world had been dead all along, replaced by someone else entirely. I kept asking myself, how could she do this? How could she betray her own family, her vows, her marriage, and why? For what? Sex? Money? Both. I started considering my options. Divorce was inevitable, but I also knew I needed to protect myself, financially and emotionally. I contacted a lawyer, started gathering evidence, and made plans to take control of what was left of my life. I also started questioning everything. Was I blind? Did I miss the signs? How did I not see this coming? The trust was gone, shattered into tiny pieces. And yet I still loved her, or at least I thought I did. That's what hurt the most. The betrayal of everything I believed in, the destruction of my family, all for a quick affair and greed. I realized I had to be smarter now. Jessica was a liar, a manipulator, and a thief. She'd lied so much that I wasn't even sure what was real anymore. But I knew. One thing: I wouldn't let her get away with it, not without consequences. The next steps would be crucial. I was determined to fight for what was mine, to expose her and to make her pay for the pain she caused. But I also knew it wouldn't be easy. The emotional toll was heavy. I felt like I was drowning in betrayal and heartbreak. Still, I had to stay strong. I had to get through this somehow. The days that followed were a blur of legal consultations, financial reviews, and sleepless nights. I couldn't believe how quickly everything had unraveled. I had always thought of Jessica as a confident, ambitious woman, someone who knew what she wanted. Turns out, she was just a master manipulator. She lied about her feelings, her spending, her fidelity, all to hide her affair with Mike, and to cover up the fact that she'd stolen a fortune from us. I kept replaying everything in my mind, trying to connect the dots, trying to understand how I missed all the warning signs. I remember sitting in the lawyer's office, looking over the documents I'd gathered: bank statements, text messages, emails. I wanted to be thorough, to make sure I had everything I needed to fight her in court. Jessica had already started spinning her web of lies, claiming I was abusive, controlling, and mentally unstable. She painted herself as the victim, as if her affair and theft were just misunderstandings. She actually had the nerve to claim I hit her once, which was a total lie. But that's Jessica for you: blame shifting, lying, twisting everything to her advantage. Meanwhile, I was furious. Not just because she cheated or stole from me, but because she dared to accuse me of something I never did. I'd never raised my hand to her, never yelled at her in anger. The emotional abuse she was claiming was pure fiction. I just wanted the truth out in the open. I knew I had to be strategic, and I started working with my lawyer on how to approach the divorce, the financial restitution, and even the custody of our 2 kids. Jessica's greed knew no bounds. She was claiming half of my inheritance, even though most of it was accumulated before we got married. She argued she deserved a share because she was married to me during the time I inherited the estate. I couldn't believe her audacity. She was already living beyond her means, spending money I earned and then some, and now she wanted a piece of what I'd worked for all my life. The whole situation felt surreal, like I was fighting a war I didn't sign up for. One day, I found out she'd been trying to get her hands on more money too. I discovered she'd contacted a lawyer behind my back, trying to negotiate her own settlement. She was playing dirty, trying to spin her lies into a sympathy story to get what she wanted. I was sickened by how far she was willing to go just to get her hands on more cash and to keep her secret life hidden. I knew I had to be one step ahead, so I increased my legal team's involvement, prepared to fight her in court. At the same time, I started feeling a mix of sadness and anger. I'd loved Jessica once, or at least I thought I did. Now I saw her as a thief, a manipulator, and someone who had destroyed my trust. It hurt to realize how deeply she betrayed me, especially when I looked at our kids. I didn't want to drag them into this mess, but I knew Jessica's lies could threaten their stability too. That made me even more determined to protect what was left of my family and my reputation. The worst part was the betrayal of my brother Mike. I'd always thought he was a good guy, someone I could trust. Turns out, he was just as guilty. Jessica had been meeting him secretly, sharing her lies, her plans, her life behind my back. That revelation was like a punch in the gut, seeing how much she'd betrayed not just me but also her own brother. I confronted Mike directly and he didn't deny anything. Instead, he tried to justify it, saying he didn't want to hurt me, but that was bullshit. They both hurt me deeply and I couldn't forgive that easily. I started questioning everything, my judgment, my choices, my trust in people. How could someone I loved so much turn into a liar and a thief? How did I not see the signs? I felt like I'd been living in a fog, and now that it had lifted, I was left with a wreckage of broken trust and shattered dreams. But amid all this chaos, I knew I had to focus. I had to stay strong for my kids, for myself. I couldn't let Jessica win, not after everything she'd done. So I made a decision. I would fight her in court, fight to get back what she stole, and fight to protect my family's future. I wasn't going to let her manipulate her way out of this. I had the evidence, I had the support, and more than anything, I had my dignity to reclaim. It wasn't going to be easy, I knew that. Jessica was cunning and she'd do anything to keep her secrets hidden. But I was done being the victim. From now on, I was going to be the one in control, and I would see this through no matter what it took. The legal battle dragged on longer than I expected, but I was determined to see it through. Jessica's lies kept piling up. She claimed I was violent, that I'd been abusive, all in an effort to sway the court and spin her narrative. Her bitchy attitude only grew worse as she realized her lies weren't working entirely in her favor, but she was relentless. Every day, I poured myself into gathering more evidence, talking to witnesses, and preparing for the inevitable courtroom showdown. Meanwhile, Jessica's financial manipulations became even more apparent. I discovered she'd opened multiple secret bank accounts in her name, funneling money away from our joint accounts. She'd also been applying for credit cards under different aliases, trying to hide her spending sprees. It was clear she'd been planning this entire scheme for months, possibly even years, just to keep her affair with Mike going and to cover her tracks. The more I uncovered, the angrier I got. She wasn't just a cheating wife, she was a thief, a liar, and a manipulator. One of the most shocking revelations came when I found out she was trying to claim half of my inheritance in court. That inheritance was from my grandparents, money I'd inherited long before I married Jessica. Still, she argued that because we were married at the time, she deserved a share. That made my blood boil. I had worked my ass off for that money, and now she was trying to steal it just because she was married to me. It was beyond unfair, and I knew I had to fight even harder to protect what was mine. Jessica's lawyer was relentless, trying to paint her as a victim and me as the villain. They argued that I was controlling and abusive, trying to discredit me. But I had the evidence, texts, bank statements, witnesses. I brought in a private investigator to track her secret meetings, and I even hired a financial expert to testify about her scams. Every piece of evidence pointed to her guilt, and I could see her frustration mounting as her lies crumbled under scrutiny. The court hearings were intense. Jessica showed her bitchy side more than once, interrupting, yelling, even crying fake tears when it suited her. She claimed she was the victim of a controlling husband who didn't care about her feelings. She insisted she only took the money because she needed to escape, that she was stressed and overwhelmed. But I knew better. I knew she was a selfish, manipulative woman who'd do anything to get her way. I couldn't let her manipulate the system to her advantage. Throughout all this, my emotional state was one day I was furious, ready to fight her to the death. The next, I was utterly exhausted, feeling like I'd lost part of myself. I'd loved her once, or at least I thought I did, but now I saw her as a scheming, lying thief. It hurt to realize how much I'd trusted her, and how that trust had been so completely shattered. I wondered if I'd ever be able to forgive her or even trust anyone again. The kids didn't know the full extent of what was happening, but I could see the confusion in their eyes. Jessica tried to spin her lies to them, claiming I was a bad father, that I was mean and controlling. I stayed quiet for their sake, but inside I was burning with rage. I wanted to protect them from all this mess, but I knew the truth had to come out. They deserved to know their mother was not the person I thought she was. In the end, I realized that Jessica's greatest weapon was her ability to lie and manipulate. But I had the truth on my side. I knew I was fighting for my dignity, my money, and my family's future. I refused to let her walk away with everything she wanted, especially not the money she'd stolen or the inheritance she didn't deserve. I stayed focused, kept my integrity intact, and prepared myself for whatever came next. Looking back, I see how much I've grown through all this chaos. It's been a brutal lesson in trust, betrayal, and resilience. I don't know what the final outcome will be, but I do know one thing: I won't let her win. Not without a fight. And I'll do whatever it takes to make sure justice is served, because I deserve that much after everything she's put me through. The court date finally arrived, and I was more nervous than I'd ever been. All the evidence I'd collected, the bank statements, the text messages, the witness testimonies, were laid out in front of the judge. Jessica's lawyer tried every trick in the book to discredit me, to paint her as the innocent victim, but I held my ground. I knew the truth, and I was determined to make sure it came out. Jessica, on the other hand, looked increasingly desperate. Her bitchy attitude had turned into outright hostility, snapping at everyone, trying to intimidate the court. Jessica's main argument was that I'd been controlling and emotionally abusive, that I'd hit her once, that I'd been a terrible husband. She repeatedly claimed she was just trying to find herself, that her affair and theft were a result of her unhappiness, but her words rang hollow. I had witnesses that I'd never raised a hand or even yelled at her. My lawyer presented proof of her secret accounts, her transfers of money, and her ongoing affair with Mike. It was clear she'd been lying her ass off. The judge listened carefully, asking pointed questions. I was nervous but confident. I knew I had the facts on my side. I also about how she had siphoned $200, $0 from our joint account, money we'd saved for years, and how she'd been secretly meeting with my brother, betraying her own family. I explained how her lies about domestic abuse were just a desperate attempt to cover her tracks and distract from her theft. Jessica's reaction was a mixture of rage and tears. She tried to manipulate the court, crying fake tears and claiming she only done it because she was overwhelmed. She insisted she loved me and that she never meant to hurt anyone, but her words didn't match her actions. The evidence was overwhelming. It was clear she'd planned this entire scheme, cheating, stealing, lying to escape her own failures and greed. The judge finally ruled in my favor. She ordered Jessica to pay back the stolen money, which I could finally see returning to our accounts. She also Jessica's claim to half of my inheritance, citing that it was separate property earned before our marriage. The court recognized her deceit and manipulation, and I felt a huge weight lift off my shoulders. But even with the victory, I knew the emotional scars would take longer to heal. Jessica was furious. She stormed out of the courtroom, screaming, calling me names, accusing me of ruining her life. But I didn't care. I'd fought for what was right, for what I deserved. I had exposed her lies and theft, and I'd protected my kids from her manipulations. The aftermath wasn't just about winning in court. It was about reclaiming my dignity and starting over. In the days that followed, I began rebuilding. I filed for divorce, started the process of dividing assets, and made sure Jessica couldn't hurt us anymore. I also cut ties with her completely. She tried to contact me a few times after the court ruling, but I ignored her. I wanted nothing to do with her lies or her manipulations anymore. My focus now was on healing, on making sure my kids felt safe and loved, and on moving forward with my life. Looking back, I realize how much betrayal can change you. I trusted Jessica with everything, my love, my money, my family, and she threw it all away for sex and greed. But I learned something vital. No matter how deep the betrayal, you can find a way out. You can reclaim your life, your dignity, and your future. I'm not completely healed yet, but I'm on that path. And I want anyone going through similar hell to know there is a way out. You just have to be willing to fight for it, no matter how hard it gets. It's been a few months since the court ruling, and honestly, I feel like I'm just starting to breathe again. The pain of betrayal still lingers, but I've managed to rebuild some semblance of stability. My kids are doing better. I've been focused on making sure they feel safe and loved, despite everything Jessica threw at us. I cut her out of our lives completely, no. More calls, no more texts, no contact at all. She's trying to spin her version of events to anyone who will listen, but I don't care anymore. The truth is out, and that's all I need. Looking back, I realize how much this experience changed me. I always thought I was a strong, dependable guy, someone who could handle anything. But betrayal cuts deep. It makes you question everything you thought was real. Still, I learned that resilience is possible, even after the worst kind of heartbreak. The betrayal from Jessica, especially with my own brother involved, was a gut punch I never saw coming. It shattered my trust in family, in love, in the idea that I could build a future with someone I loved. But I also learned something else. I'm stronger than I thought. I fought back, I exposed the lies, and I refused to let her manipulate me or take what was rightfully mine. The legal process was brutal, long, exhausting, and emotionally draining, but I came out the other side with my dignity intact. I realized that standing up for myself was the only way to truly move forward. Now, I'm focused on healing. I've started therapy, trying to process everything, and I'm working on rebuilding my confidence. I've cut ties with Jessica and her family entirely. I've also been more cautious about who I trust and how I handle my personal life. I don't take anything for granted anymore, especially not the people I love. My main priority now is my kids and making sure they grow up in a stable, loving environment, something Jessica tried to destroy, but I refused to let her. This whole ordeal has been a brutal lesson in the importance of boundaries, honesty, and self-respect. I want anyone reading this who's going through something similar to know you're not alone. Betrayal hurts like hell, but it's possible to come out of it stronger. You can rebuild, you can recover, and you can find happiness again. It might take time and it might be messy, but trust me, there's life after betrayal, and it's worth fighting for. I don't have all the answers and I still have scars, but I know I'm headed in the right direction. I've learned that sometimes the worst things in life can teach you the most about yourself. And in the end, that's what truly matters. Moving forward, I'll treasure honesty, loyalty, and integrity more than ever. Jessica's betrayal was a dark chapter, but I refuse to let it define me. Instead, I'll use it as a reminder to never settle for less than the truth, and to always stand up for myself, no matter how hard it gets.